Have you ever noticed how some of these simplest stories seem to hold the deepest truths? Well, today we're going to dive into one of the oldest, most powerful forms of storytelling out there, the fable. You know, those tiny little tales that pack a massive punch. And we're going to be using a legendary collection of wisdom to guide us. So, the book we're pulling from is Volume 17 of the Harvard Classics called Folklore and Fable. And this isn't just some random book of fairy tales, okay? This is a collection of stories that have literally shaped how people think for centuries. We're going straight to the source for some of civilization's most enduring wisdom. It sounds like such a simple question, right? But the answer, man, it gets to the very core of who we are. Before we were building cities, before we were writing laws, before pretty much anything else, we were telling stories. So why? What is this deep down human need to create a narrative? All right, let's start at the very beginning. Long before fables even existed, we just had storytelling itself. And it turns out this isn't just a hobby or something we do for fun, it's practically baked into our DNA. It's part of what makes us human. This quote from our source text just nails it. Storytelling isn't something we invented, it's an instinct. The book makes a point that researchers find this habit absolutely everywhere, from the earliest civilizations to, and I'm quoting here, the most barbarous savages. It's just a universal human thing. And these stories weren't just campfire entertainment, though that was definitely part of it. That pure human delight in a good story is real. But right from the start, stories had critical jobs to do in society. They explained religious beliefs, they taught important lessons, they helped build a sense of national pride, and they were even used for political jabs. Okay, so if you rewind all the way back, the absolute oldest stories we have are myths. Now, today we think of myths as these epic tales of gods and heroes, but their original job was way more practical. They were basically our first crack at science. Now, to really get myths, you have to get inside the worldview that created them, and that's animism. For early humans, there wasn't a clear line between a person, an animal, or even a rock. Everything had a personality, a will, a spirit. The storm wasn't like an angry person. For the mythmakers, the storm was an angry person. So what this all means is that myths were humanity's first attempt to explain the unexplainable. Why is thunder crashing in the sky? Oh, that's a powerful being making a racket. Where'd fire come from? Well, some clever hero or animal must have stolen it. This was pretty much humanity's first draft instruction manual for how the universe worked. But, things change. Storytelling evolved. And at a certain point, a totally new kind of story started to show up. The focus shifted from explaining the world around us to explaining ourselves. And this, right here, is the birth of the fable. And this chart just lays out the difference perfectly. A myth tries to answer a question about nature, like, why does it rain? A fable answers a question about us, about human behavior, like, why shouldn't you lie? A myth is based on that literal belief of animism, but a fable uses animals as an allegory, a conscious symbol for human traits. The whole purpose shifts from a kind of primitive science to a deliberate, crafted lesson. And here's another key distinction. You see, folk tales might just sort of bubble up from a community over time, but fables are a literary form. They are intentionally designed by a storyteller, the learned, to teach a very specific lesson. They're clever, they're short, and they are built with a purpose. And when you think about fables, one name immediately pops into your head, right? Aesop. But the story of the man himself is almost as fascinating as the tales that are named after him. So this is a question that has stumped historians for centuries. Was he a real person, a legend, or just a convenient name to slap onto a whole style of story? Well, the truth is kind of a little bit of all three. Okay, so according to the historian Herodotus, Aesop was a real dude. He was a slave living back in 6th century BC Greece. And here's the really cool part. He supposedly used these little animal stories for political reasons, as a way to criticize powerful people when you couldn't just speak your mind without getting into serious trouble. Over time, his name just became the brand name for this kind of story, a catch-all for fables, even though technically we can't prove he actually wrote any single one that we know today. All right, so let's get into the good stuff. Let's look at how these fables actually work their magic. Their genius is all in their simplicity. They take some complicated human flaw or virtue and just boil it down into a short, unforgettable story. This is such a classic. It's all about power and injustice. The setup is so simple, but the lesson,
Wow, it's profound. So you've got this wolf who sees a lamb drinking downstream, and he wants to eat it. But instead of just pouncing, he needs an excuse. First, he accuses the lamb of making the water dirty, but the lamb points out, the water's flowing from you to me. So the wolf tries again, accusing the lamb of insulting him a year ago. The lamb says he's only 6 months old. Finally, the wolf just gives up on logic and says, well, if it wasn't you, it was your father, and eats the lamb anyway. And damn, there it is. The moral, dropped in a single, devastating line. It's not about wolves and lambs, is it? It's about how people with power will just make up any excuse they need to get what they want from the powerless. It's a whole political science lesson in just 5 words.
Okay, let's do another one. This time, we're looking at a completely different human weakness. Good old-fashioned vanity. So picture this. A crow is sitting on a branch with a big piece of cheese in her beak. A fox down below wants that cheese. So what does he do? He starts laying on the compliments thick. He's talking about her glossy feathers, her beautiful eyes, and then says he's sure her voice must be the most beautiful of all. He begs her to sing just one song. The crow, totally flattered, opens her beak to let out a call, and of course, the cheese drops right into the fox's mouth. And the moral is just as blunt and just as timeless. The fox even says he's giving her this advice in exchange for your cheese. It's this perfect little package that warns us that praise is often just a tool someone's using to get something from you. It's stories like these, and hundreds more, that show why fables went viral, spreading way beyond ancient Greece. As our book says so perfectly, they've become the common property of all peoples. They really do belong to everyone now. So what's the secret sauce here? Why have these little tales survived for over 2,500 years? Well, for one, using animals lets us see our own flaws without getting all defensive. Two, the lessons are crystal clear and so easy to remember. And their wisdom about things like greed and power, that's universal. It works just as well in a corporate boardroom today as it did in an ancient market. And finally, that punchy moral at the end, it's like a perfect headline for the whole lesson, making it super sticky. And that brings us right back to where we started. From ancient myths trying to explain thunder to fables warning us about tyrants, we are animals who make sense of our world through stories. So as we wrap this up, it's worth asking yourself, what are your fables? What are the small, simple stories that you keep coming back to for their deep and timeless truths?